Welcome back to Beauty Marks Podcast, a space where we embrace our marks acquired through our journey. My name is Elizabeth Savillon, and welcome to another episode of this podcast. I am back at Hi Hello Labs and in the beautiful studio, and if you haven't already, make sure to check them out for any podcast and studio needs, because I definitely feel like this setup is really nice, and I'm just really excited for today's conversation on a very important topic that I feel like we kind of shy away from or don't want to talk about because it is difficult, and sometimes we don't understand it, or we feel like it doesn't relate to us, or we feel like we don't know how to help, so it's like we can't be a big change in the world because it's going to happen anyways. So there's a lot of misconceptions. So I brought in Heather Case, which is the founder of One Purse, and that is an organization that helps women get out of human trafficking, and that works with kind of helping people from the ground up, to rebuild their life and give them hope and a future. And so I'm so excited to have Heather here. So welcome to Beauty Marks Podcast.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate this opportunity so much.
Yes, I'm just really excited for you to share your heart today with us and just the purpose-driven life that you have created for others, really, but I know it's starting from you. So can you share a little bit of your passions and what you enjoy?
Sure. I'm a very passionate person. So there's a lot of things that I have passion around.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a woman of faith, and really everything in my life is informed through my faith. So I'm very passionate about that. I'm also married to my husband. We celebrated 25 years of marriage.
That's amazing.
Yesterday.
Congratulations. What are the tips?
Yeah.
What are the tips?
Lots of grace, lots of forgiveness.
I love that.
Yeah. So very blessed. He's an amazing man, and we have 4 children. So obviously very passionate about my family and, really the values that we instill in them. Those are passions of mine. But ultimately, I'm very, very, very passionate about freedom. I'm passionate about the dignity and worth of every human being, and the purpose that God designed each one of us for. And I think those things, the freedom and purpose and dignity of human beings, is really what has driven me into the work of One Purse. It's really the space that's given me an opportunity to be invested in seeing people experience freedom and hope, and to uncover their purpose in the world. We know that they were made for so much more than what they have experienced. And so a big part of my passion is seeing people uncover that purpose in their life.
And you facilitate the space for that, which is beautiful, because when you have been given so much and you have had a life that we all have experienced hurt and pain and all of that, but when we're able to step out and also think of others and be like, how can we transform and help others to see how there's so much hope and life beyond what they have experienced. So I would love for you to share what started One Purse, and because I know that you were in the finance world for some time. So how did that even start for you?
Yeah. So I would say it's somewhat of a calling story. I was in the finance industry for 15 years, and having those 4 children, life was very full. I was working easily 50, 60 hours a week. So I came home to be with my children. But within that first year, I got really involved with a Bible study at my church. And I would say I was kind of awakened to the needs of those around me. My life had been so full and so busy that, to be honest, I didn't really see past my own life, you know? And over that first year, I just started to be acquainted with the needs of vulnerable women and children, internationally, but also domestically. And I was shopping in an upscale consignment store in Winter Park, and I found this beautiful Furla purse, and I wanted this bag so bad.
You're like, must have.
Needed it, thought I couldn't live without it. However, I was now on the stay-at-home mom budget, and this purse was not in my budget.
Downsizing.
Yeah, that's right. And so I had to leave it, but I say that it didn't leave me. I went back and visited it several times. Took a friend along, hoping she would encourage me that it was okay to buy the bag. And I then had this strong conviction on my heart that for the amount of money I was considering spending on this one purse, I could change someone else's life. And I was like, wow, God, what is that? I've had nice bags before, or I've had nice bags since. All I can say is he just used that moment in time and that object to just grab my heart. And so I went home to my husband and I said, I know this sounds crazy, but I think God is calling me to do something with purses to help vulnerable women and children. And he was like, really? Because I thought he was calling you to be home with our 4 kids. And I was like, well, I'm going to do that too.
Yeah.
But I feel compelled,
Wow.
I just felt so compelled. And at that time I came across a verse in Luke 12 where Jesus said, sell your possessions and give to those in need. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that does not fail. And I was like, okay, God, you are clearly calling me to do something. Yeah, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to take a step, And so I went back to those same ladies that I was in Bible study with. And I said, I want you to donate your purses to me, come to my house for brunch. Love for you to pick out a purse that's new to you and give a donation in exchange for that purse. And we're going to raise money to help another community. And so at the outset of one purse, it was very diverse. I mean, that very first project was a freshwater well in Ethiopia.
Oh, wow.
And so you're like, how do you go from a freshwater well in Ethiopia to now serving trafficking survivors? And it was really just a journey of the Lord just opening up my own eyes and understanding. If you had asked me what trafficking was back then, I would have definitely described something in the developing world. Like I had no idea it was happening here.
Yeah.
I had no idea what it looked like here. I had no understanding of the complexity or needs of survivors here. And so I really went on a journey of my own understanding. But within that first year, we started serving trafficking survivors, and I started to really feel my heart be drawn toward them and their plight. And it took us a couple of years until we refined the mission to exclusively serving survivors. And then even from there, it was an evolution of understanding, because when I came to understand it was happening here, I thought, okay, well, the right thing to do is raise resources to get to the front line, those who are housing them, giving them safe housing and things like that, which is very, very important. But what I came to understand is so many of them were coming out of those amazing places where they had been served, and they were going right back to being trafficked again.
Wow.
Which we don't understand in our culture very well. But the reality is they're trafficked through their vulnerabilities. And if we don't help address their vulnerabilities, they're at high risk, we would say as high as 80% of being re-exploited.
Wow.
And so we really saw a gap. There really wasn't anybody serving in this place of helping them to establish an economic freedom. And so in 2016, we launched the Restore Her Dream Fund, which is a scholarship program exclusively for survivors of trafficking.
Wow.
And through that program, we've now helped over 400 women take their next steps.
Wow.
And they're out there now in the community as graphic design artists and paralegals and doing the things they were made to do.
Yeah.
And they just needed the resources and the belief that they had greater purpose than what their life experiences had been. And so, honestly, it's been an evolution of just doing the next thing. But it's been amazing.
It out. I can see how, your obedience to that as well, for you to see, okay, there's something here. And so I'm going to step out even if I don't know, the rest of how that's going to play out. Because sometimes that's what God dreams look like. You're that's right. God, I don't know how that's all going to play out, but I'm going to trust this. And then he puts people and he aligns. And it seems like that's how it worked out of 100%. Putting the education and maybe partners for you.
For sure. And I would say that is so true to our nature that we want to know the beginning from the end, right?
Always.
Tell me where we're going and then I'll decide if I'm willing to go, and so much of my journey has been not knowing the next step and just having to pray and seek wisdom and seek the counsel of others. And we do, one of our values as an organization is that we collaborate for the cause of love and justice. And so we collaborate with a lot of organizations in the work, a lot of organizations that we would say are serving survivors and at an earlier place on the continuum of care, making some of those initial investments that are needed and then referring them to us for resources when they're ready.
And I know you shared something that I feel like is very I can relate to that. When something that we don't think is happening around us, we start making these statements that's our lack of knowledge sometimes and information and education that we, maybe need to have. Right. So how how did you get to the place of seeing like what is really happening here in Orlando and Central Florida that you kind of see like, oh wow, like I really wasn't seeing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the earlier partnerships that we had was with a safe home for minor girls in the Central Florida area. And so we would go in and do mentoring with them and just started seeing like, this could be my daughter. This could be my sister. This could be, from all walks of life, all demographics, all, and just realizing, they too need hope. They too need a future. And, I don't love statistics in the work because it's really hard. I mean, we're not counting Caucasian children in public school, right? These are acts and exploitations that happen in the darkest corners of our community and our world. But we do know that as a state and as a place within the state with a lot of tourism, we know there's a very high rate of trafficking in our community. And so I think it's important for us as members of the community to care about that, to care for those that are being exploited in these ways and making sure that they have the resources to come out of those circumstances and to have the same opportunity for a future that we desire for ourselves, that we desire for our children, that we desire for our sisters.
I hear you say like it can be anyone. Like we maybe have a misconception. So what does that usually look like? Or what are maybe some misconceptions that we have about sex trafficking, human trafficking that we maybe need to like see the other side of?
That's such a great question. First, I would say that when trafficking victims escape their circumstances, they're not free. We tend to think, okay, I saw this person on the news and there was this sting and now they're out and they're good, right? They should be fine. But if we really come to understand their plight, we realize, this is a long journey to freedom for them from a physical standpoint, a mental, emotional, spiritual, economic. They have a long journey ahead of them. So I think that's one of the number one misconceptions. And then the entertainment industry, media, and movies have kind of taught us this white vans and abductions kind of perspective on trafficking. And that's actually less than 5%. So less than 5% of victims are abducted into trafficking. The other 95% are exploited through their vulnerabilities. So they were in some place on the margin in our community to begin with. Poverty, sexual abuse in the home, addiction, foster care system. They were vulnerable before trafficking entered their world. And trafficking is often happening by someone very close to them. Unfortunately, familial trafficking is more common than people want to know or recognize. And then also people who develop relationships with them, people that they believe at the outset is their boyfriend or is this person that has a genuine interest in them. And traffickers are masterful at exploiting vulnerabilities, and they're masterful at spending extended periods of time grooming their victims, making their victims feel safe, all the while pushing boundaries with them of things that they expect. And all the while they're gaining knowledge that they can use to keep them enslaved, people in their world that they could threaten harm over if they don't do what they want them to do. And so it's a very complex and insidious, process. And I think people, when you have that picture of Hollywood's version of it, then you don't understand. It can be the girl in the classroom at the back of school that's acting out for some way, in some way. And you don't realize this is happening when she goes home. This older guy's picking her up and this is what's being required of her in her non-school time, So we don't see it, or when, someone comes into the emergency room with different circumstances going on and we don't realize, what's actually happening behind this. If we think it's white vans and abductions, we miss it standing in front of us at the grocery store.
Yeah. I think that most people think of Taken as like, they do when I go. And that's, I think that's the scariest, like, we have to be like, as women, like surrounding ourselves, like being very aware of our surroundings in that space. But I think that's an area that, even with sexual abuse, that's usually with someone that you know.
Right.
So I can only imagine that it's like the trust that you build with someone that you feel like is taking care of you or is helping you. And then it ends up being someone that has, like how you were saying, is grooming you to exploit something. So that's so heartbreaking.
It is.
And the age range that you see, or the women that you help, is it young girls? Is it like young adults? What are the age ranges?
It's a full age range. We would say the average age is 11 to 13, not of whom we serve, but of when the first incidents of trafficking are happening in their lives. Unfortunately, they're oftentimes not getting out of those circumstances, or they're being re-exploited. We would say it as at a rate of as many as 80% are exploited more than once by more than one trafficker at more than one time, and that they're all at risk for that to happen.
Wow.
And so when we're serving them is sort of at that reintegration stage, when they're needing to now identify what's next in their life and how are they going to provide for themselves. And so in that space, those that we're serving are more maybe 18 to 40. Some are older than 40. Some are maybe emerging into, adulthood, but the majority of them are in that, age range.
Wow. But they have already been experiencing this for years.
For years.
Wow.
And that's another question that comes up for people because, culturally we would say, what is the difference between prostitution and trafficking, right? A lot of people have that question. Sometimes they're afraid to ask that question, but that question is on their mind. And as an organization, we come from a place that says no little girl lays in her bed at 5 years old and says, when I grow up, I want to be bought and sold for sex.
Wow.
So if we stand first at that place of understanding, then we start to gain some greater understanding around those we may see in the community and assign to them, this person is a prostitute. But again, and these are not great statistics, but we know statistically speaking, somewhere between 80 and 90% of those that we would see and believe that about, there's third-party control in place there. Somebody else is profiting from them, from what they're doing. And we also see circumstances like that sometimes, and we lay over that like choice sometimes, like why would, but if you really think about that, choice infers options, and it's just not real that people choose that for their life if they feel there are other paths of provision and opportunities for them. And so that's kind of another subject that we're passionate about educating the community on, so that when we see those, that we might have those thoughts about, we see them and have compassion for them. And that doesn't mean they're all ready to receive or pursue the help that's available to them. But I think it's important, back to the dignity and worth of every human being, that we see they were made for so much more than this. And how can we love them, come alongside of them, offer resources and opportunities to them.
I love what you said. That is the reality. Is like choices is also a privilege for some. And if you're at that place, like, and we judge sometimes, and that's a part that like we have to look in ourselves to be like, oh, wow, like look at what they're doing, but you don't know the circumstances or the story behind that person. Right. And there's, I don't know the organization's name right now, but they tell survivor stories. So they pretty much get a whole bunch of women that have been through human trafficking, and they share their like full story, like 45-minute, an hour, like interview with them. And it's so heartbreaking. Like every time it breaks my heart so much. But like when you hear what they've been through, I have so much empathy and compassion, because I'm like, I can't even say that I would do something different, because I'm not in her shoes.
Right.
And I will never understand what she experienced. And I know also males also experience it as well. So it's so heartbreaking to know that some people, like, that's their life. But I know that you provide the place of hope and the place of like, we're going to get you out of this. And like, we see far more beyond that. So what are the things that you have seen of like them kind of like their recovery or like their life change, you know, like how has that been?
Yeah, it's beautiful. So we've kind of had an evolution in our model. So obviously that first original one purse gathering was women donating bags and then giving donations in exchange for them. Over COVID, we actually launched a social enterprise. We now have a work therapy program where women, trafficking survivors are employed in that work therapy program. And all of the work that they do is women in the community donating their pre-loved designer purses that are in their closets. Maybe they haven't carried it in 2 years, can literally be the conduit of work and employment for these women. Wow. And so when those bags come in, they handle everything from cleaning them, researching their value, writing descriptions about them, photographing them, handling all the customer service online, shipping them out, everything, learning in-demand job skills. Two of the women in our program right now, they've both gotten their AA since being employed with us. One of them is going on to be an EMT. That's her dream for her life. And so we're able to give her a safe work environment, a trauma-informed work environment while she's building these additional skills to pursue the career that she's passionate about. And, one thing that's often also misunderstood or not fully understood about trafficking is this is a generational, there's generational impact in this. When you come to understand the vulnerabilities that were present before, they may not have been the first person in their family to be exploited, but if they're now a mother, they're not the only person being impacted either. Wow. And so some of the women we're serving have children. And so not only are the skills that are being imparted and the worth and the value and the, things that are being deposited in them impacting their lives, but they're impacting the lives of their children. And so we just think that's very powerful. And, we fiercely protect the identity of the women that we serve because we do feel like it's very much their choice as to whether or not they want to publicly identify with this part of their past. Because for some of them, that's a super a big passion in their life and something they feel called into. And others want to build what you or I might consider a more normal, anonymous life.
Yeah,
and
like they want to move forward and
never not be publicly known.
Yes, publicly.
And both of those have great, that's a very individual decision.
Yeah.
And so we encourage them in that. We encourage them to take their time to determine which of those two paths is best for them. And, but it really is beautiful to see. So we have that employment program and also the education program. And so we have the privilege of seeing women in both of those spaces just stepping into amazing futures that, only a matter of years ago they could only dream of. And some of them, we say we hold belief for them until they can hold it for themselves. Because, at our first interaction with many of these women, they don't have a dream for their future. No one's ever encouraged or invited them to have a dream for their future. They have been in circumstances, some of them from birth, that were things you or I could never imagine. And so the idea that they were made for more and that there's opportunity and resources for them to become the more, and that there's amazing women like us willing to cheer them on and seeking that more, that's a revelation for them, but it's a really beautiful, redemptive work to be able to watch and see.
On your website, it's like empowering her dreams or empower her dreams. And I think that's beautiful because you're giving them kind of that hope or like that like belief in themselves that they might never see. And so how powerful that is to have someone that believes in you. And it's like, I'm going to walk through the journey with you. I'm not going to leave you like, oh, okay, here's money to help you. It's like, no, like I'm going to help you through the whole process. So I feel like I can only imagine the joy that brings you to see like from the start to the end of seeing people get out, women get out, that you help them, you see where they're at today, and you're like, wow, that was part of your story, but that wasn't the whole story.
Right.
And that's such a beautiful transformation. And so even for you, Heather, like how has this work that you've done kind of been part of your story?
That's a great question. I think we're all on a journey, to experiencing freedom and wholeness. I think when we find ourselves in certain callings and spaces in life, it's not by accident. I have some painful pieces of my own story that while I was never trafficked, I did experience some things that have intersections with the pain and struggles that they have known, that I personally have known. And I think I was sharing that before we got started, that, you see these women and you come to realize we're more alike than we are different, that we have all journeyed hard things. We may not have the same forms of complex trauma that some of them may know, but, I'm 49 years old and I'm still, on a journey of finding wholeness in the little nooks and crannies of my own heart, my own story. And, but I think that is one of the reasons it's so important that we move outside of ourselves. I think in giving ourselves away, oftentimes we come to understand things about ourselves we couldn't otherwise know.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful and it's redemptive. It can also be painful, you know, as you were sharing a few minutes ago, like it's not a linear journey for any one of these women, you know, just like our lives are not.
Yeah.
You know, we can want the up and to the right life, but that's just not the experience most
Healing
of us
is
know.
Like,
yeah, that's right. We're up and then we're down and we're looping back and now we're making some progress, you know? And so I think just appreciating that for them, but also appreciating it for ourselves, that we have grace for where we are and we have hope for where we're trying to go, and that we trust that process, you know, and that we let people in, you know. Community is so important to our healing journey. So that's certainly been true in my life.
That's beautiful. I stand with everything that you said, because I think that's like, as we're helping others, we see how like that transforms our heart and our lives. And sometimes through like the work that we do, we're like, wow, like God connected that like to heal me a little bit, like, you know, and bring things in me, or like show areas that we need to continue to work on.
Yes.
So it's beautiful to see how you say that it's like, that has been something that God put in your heart, but like you do, you have some commonality with some heartache that maybe that goes with someone that is hurting. And I feel like God uses that, like the pain that we've experienced, to help other people. And it's so liberating and freeing for us to see like, wow, it's not only for us, it's for other people. And so I love the heart behind one person, and even your story, which I know that it's briefly of what you shared, but how can people help, you know? And you know, there's something happening in Orlando that people sometimes don't want to talk about, of human trafficking, but how can someone be a part of what you're doing?
Thank you so much for asking, because we need our community involved in our work. It's so important. A simple answer would be that on our website at onepurse.org, there's a Get Involved tab, but I'd love to share some of the specific ways. Obviously, as a nonprofit, financial support is huge. It allows us to do the work that we do and to bless the women that we serve. But beyond that, our greatest need is pre-loved designer purses. The purses that I know are in the closets of women all across this town, all across the nation. There's no shortage of purses. You know, I say it's like a renewable resource, right?
It's like a collection. People have collections of purses.
And I think, you know, I really think they need to know, you know, like we might value something, but the value of that thing on the other side given away in this circumstance is so much more powerful and impactful than even the price that was paid for it to begin with, or what we might be holding on to it and thinking that value attributes to us, when we know that we can take those bags out of our closet and give them to one person, put them into the hands of survivors who are going to convert them into resources. You know, that's what our social enterprise allows us to do, is we actually have an earned revenue stream on the sale of those bags.
That's amazing.
So the more bags we collect, the more survivors we can hire.
It's just, wow.
Yeah, it's huge. We also say, like, become educated. You know, that's why. So I thank you, Elizabeth, for having me here today and allowing us to share. I think the public does need to know, and it is a dark subject matter, and I completely understand why we kind of stand back from it at times, but yet, especially as a person of faith, we are called to be the light and the hope. You know, we are not to run from the darkness. We're to bring light and hope into the darkness. And so we do tours on the first Friday of every month. Okay. So there's one coming up, and would love for, you know, anyone who follows the podcast that would like to come, we invite them to come out. And there you kind of get to see the work from the inside out and see what happens with the purses and hear more about the impact to survivors. And then we have women that will host events and they'll collect bags for us.
Heather, I just thank you for the work that you're doing, and like for the heart that you have, that I can clearly tell in the one talk that we're having today. It's like I can definitely see the heart and purpose behind what you're doing, and it's beautiful to see that you're not only thinking about yourself but others. And I would like to ask you a question, I guess, for your younger self, of what is something that she would be proud of to see today?
Well, I would most definitely tell her that she is enough, and that you can see these are still tender places for me, right? And that God will bring purpose from the pain. Like it's not, our pain is never wasted if we are willing to place it in his hands and if we're willing to be poured out for others. And there's so much healing that comes through that. And so I would just be like, I would tell her to hang in there, and God has great plans in store for you, and he's not going to waste these things that feel hard in your life right now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I feel it. Like I feel
you see my tears.
We cry here all the time at Beauty Marks podcast. Okay, we're all for sharing our hearts and the areas that we know that like sometimes we're surprised of how God has taken us through some things. And I think that's the beautiful part, that it's like, that's why Beauty Marks podcast is all about like the marks that have hurt us and how God has made them beautiful, and like God has transformed them completely. And there's still some parts of our story that are still unfolding and still in a process, but it's like, thank you. That's encouraging. Like even to me, to be like, there's purpose.
There's always purpose
behind it. So thank you so much, Heather. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and you are amazing, the work that you're doing. And I will make sure to put all the information on the link below for you guys to check out One Purse and all the things that she's doing. Is there any other things that you want to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, just that we need you. We need those purses in your closet. We need you to come into proximity to learn more about the mission and the heart behind the work that we're doing. And we need compassionate women. We need good men too. I think sometimes I fail to say this, and I know this is probably a more predominantly female audience, but we need good men in this work. We need those that we serve, the women we serve, to know there are good men in the world. And so, men and women alike, this does affect, young men as well. So yeah, we need you.
Yes.
We need you.
No, thank you so much, Heather. And thank you guys for tuning into this week's podcast episode. I hope you were encouraged and you felt the passion and the heart here that we have for helping other people and being able to give back in whichever way you can. And so make sure to share this with a friend. Let us know what you think about this episode, and also make sure to check out One Purse and all that they're doing in the community of Orlando. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week.